This is Mayor Milch. I call to order this meeting of the City of Gladstone Budget Committee for Monday, May 15th, 2023. It's 5:30 p.m. We're meeting in the City Hall Council Chambers. City of Gladstone is abiding by guidelines set forth in House Bill 2560, which requires the governing body of the public body, to the extent reasonably possible, to make all meetings accessible remotely through technological means and provide opportunity for members of the general public to remotely submit oral and written testimony during meetings to the extent in-person oral and written testimony is allowed. Therefore, this meeting will be open to the public both in person and virtually using the Zoom platform. Instructions for joining the meeting by Zoom are printed on the agenda. And if the public would like to comment on an agenda item or during the public comment, comments were to have been mailed to the city recorder by prior to noon today. We will begin with self-introductions and we will start, let's start at this corner and move this way.
All right, Councilor Alexander, bring out your, and I've got your microphone.
That's a signal to all of us to do the same.
You're waiting for a call and you don't have one, and you go, walk out of the room for a minute, and there was, you missed it because it wasn't on, so I turned it on.
All right, Councilor Alexander, next.
Ron Ruggiero, the first budget committee meeting.
Please make sure to turn the microphone on when you speak.
You need me to do it again?
Probably would be a good idea.
All right, Ron Ruggiero, budget committee. It's my first meeting. Nice to meet you all.
Mindy Garlington, City Council.
Luke Roberts, City Council.
Shane O'Brien, this is also my first budget committee meeting.
Michael Milch, Mayor.
Gabrielle Blau, or Gabby, and this is also my first budget meeting.
Sierra Cook, City Council.
Nina Harrington, Budget Committee, first time.
Josh Smith, first budget committee.
Jackie Betts, City Administrator.
And Kathy Brecker, Financial Consultant.
Hi, John Schmerber, Chief of Police.
Tiffany Kirkpatrick, Community Service Manager.
Darren Cannon-Peroli, Public Works Director.
Two of our city council members are not seated at the table. Haley, do we have anyone participating by Zoom?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right. If those members of the committee show up later, we'll recognize them in attendance. As recently as 6 years ago, the city council had 3 members who had a family member, a direct relation, who worked for one of the departments of the city. And that requires to jump through a lot of hoops in order to approve the budget for that particular part of our city's budget. We have a number of new budget committee members here tonight, and I just wanted to check prior to the meeting to see if there's anyone who is related to a city staff person or who works for the city in some capacity, just to be sure we don't have any conflicts of interest on any portions of our budget. I'm looking around, I'm seeing heads shaking, so good. All right, that was an issue I wanted to work through. Very good. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair. The city recorder will serve as the secretary unless the Budget Committee advises otherwise, and I think we are happy with that, right? The city recorder acting as secretary. We do not have a rule in this city as to whether a city councilor can serve as chair or the budget committee. I think in recent years, we've done both. We've had a mayor or councilor chair the committee. We've had a layperson who is a member of the budget committee chair the committee. It's your pleasure. I would be willing to chair the committee if asked. I would be willing to have another member of the committee chair if they would like, or if other members of the committee would like. But I will now entertain motions to appoint a chair and vice chair of the budget committee.
Well, I would make the motion. You do that, Michael, I guess.
Second.
All right, it has been moved by Councilor Alexander and seconded by Councilor Garlington before she herself could be nominated. That's how I'm interpreting the enthusiasm for that second. That Michael Milch serve as the chair of the Budget Committee. Is there any discussion?
Is there a more senior budget committee member who would like to throw their hat in the ring?
I think almost all of you are first time. Is that correct? Yeah.
Then I think we got a pretty good idea.
Okay. And actually, before I was on the council, I was the chair of the budget committee the last time we met 2 years ago. So I do have experience chairing and moving us through.
Got my 4 budget books here.
Okay. And a lot of us have other experience in doing this. So I am happy to do that. Is this one where we should do a roll call vote or can we do a hand vote?
I think we can do a hand vote.
All right. Let me ask this. All in favor of the motion to appoint Michael Milch as chair of the budget committee indicate by raising your hand. All opposed? Same sign. Any abstentions? Okay, let the minutes show that the motion was unanimous. Is there a nomination for vice chair of budget committee?
I will nominate myself as vice chair.
All right, Mindy Garland has nominated herself.
I'll second.
All right, and that has been seconded by Councilor Roberts and Councilor Cook. Any discussion? All right. Once again, all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously as well. If I fall over during the meeting, Mindy, it's up to you. And
I just have a quick question.
yes, go ahead.
During the budget and throughout the year and now and these meetings, with you being the chair and her being the vice chair, do you guys ever work together or have to confer together? Or I mean, you know,
If we complete the task of tonight, which is to come up with the budget that we would recommend to the city council, this could be the last meeting that the budget committee has. So our first meeting is often our last meeting. There may be situations in the future when the city needs to amend its budget somewhere along during the budget year. But that usually doesn't involve the budget committee itself in that process. That's usually done at that point with the city council only action. So no, we won't be conferring on things if we adopt a budget or recommend adoption of a budget tonight. Okay, is there any public comment scheduled for this portion of the meeting? Did you hear from anyone in the public who wanted to speak at the beginning of the budget committee meeting?
No, I did not.
Okay,
And
all right.
also, Mayor, just to let you know, Counselor Huckabee and Counselor Reichel are now on Zoom.
Okay. All right. So Councilor Vanessa Huckabee and Councilor Veronica Reichel are both in attendance via Zoom. One more thing. According to state law, a 7-member city council would normally have 7 lay people as members of the budget committee. So we'd have an equal number. Right now, we are at 7 and 5. 7 councilors, all present, 5 laypersons, citizens from the community. It rarely happens, but if there were ever an issue that we're discussing tonight where the 7 city councilors looked at it one way and the 5 members of the community looked at it a different way, I want us to take some extra time to deal with that just because of that imbalance that's there now. We had a couple of resignations recently and changes and did not have time to appoint new people. But I don't want that imbalance to appear as though the views of one segment, the elected officials, are outweighing the views of the public. You who are here to represent the views of the community, and as are all the city councilors as well. But I just wanted to acknowledge that imbalance in our current makeup. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to discuss the proposed budget. You have all received a copy of it, and I will turn this portion over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Milch. As is required by Oregon law, I must read the budget message into the record. And so if you want to follow along, you can. It's on page 1 of your binder. To the Honorable Mayor, members of the Gladstone City Council, citizen members of the Budget Committee, and the citizens of the City of Gladstone. Government leaders desire to make a difference and improve the lives of the people they serve. Therefore, a city's budget should reflect shared priorities and goals. In addition, the budget process and management help elected officials make the best policy decisions possible by sharing the information learned from residents and staff. That is why the budget is among the most influential local government policy documents. The budget message aims to introduce the proposed budget and supply a brief overview of the document and how it will address the council's goals with the city's resources over the coming biennium. It is my pleasure to present for your consideration a balanced budget of $71,374,314 for the fiscal years 2023 through 2025 biennial budget, which is an increase of 13.13% from the previous biennial budget. The increase is attributable to capital improvements funding within the Public Works funds, unspent American Rescue Plan grant funds, construction of the Public Works facility, and personnel cost of living adjustments throughout all budget categories. The 2023-2025 proposed budget for the City of Gladstone is required by Oregon law. It sets standards and establishes an action, operational, and financial plan for delivering city services. The budget document is organized into 10 funds and accounts for 17 programs, in addition to the Urban Renewal Agency that publishes a separate budget. Citizens must understand that revenue sources are tied to specific expenditures and can only be used for their prescribed purpose. Each fund is designed to separate transactions in compliance with a specific program and assist in managing public dollars. Dollars can only be moved between funds with the proper budgetary appropriation. The city's financial consultant prepared the document under the guidance of the city administrator with the collaboration of an excellent management team, including the police chief, public works director, city recorder, human resources consultant, and community services manager. We have spent considerable time preparing the budget, utilizing the most accurate information to predict revenues and expenditures for the next 2 years. The City Council held a goal-setting session in January, and goals were incorporated into our work plan for the next 2 years. They build off a successful past couple of years, and the momentum will carry us into the next biennium. These goals are identified in the budget document. The city's permanent tax rate continues to be $4.8174 per thousand. The city is collecting the full permanent levy amount, and we are optimistic that revenues will remain steady. Personnel changes that have been incorporated are discussed below. The proposed budget includes 52.44 full-time employees, which will be referred to as FTEs. The FTE counts are based on the first year of the biennial budget, and individual budget details have the breakdown. The counts are also based on each employee's departmental allocation, accounting for slight differences between fiscal years. Within the Public Works Department, 1.5 FTE positions have been added that will be split amongst facilities, parks, roads and streets, sewer, water, and stormwater. An economic development and tourism coordinator position is included in this budget to align with the City Council's goal of creating a robust economic development ecosystem in Gladstone. It is a 0.75 FTE, 2-year limited duration position funded by transient lodging tax dollars and business license revenue funds. There's also an increase of 0.50 in the nutrition coordinator position at the senior center, taking it to a full-time FTE with increased volunteer coordination duties. In November 2021, the Gladstone voters approved up to $5 million for the financing and reconstruction remodeling of the Public Works facility on the existing property. This will provide a critical emergency facility to support responses to significant events such as ice storms and wildfires. Additionally, the new Civic Center building is beside this facility, creating a cohesive and attractive municipal complex for the city. The commencement of this progressive design build project is anticipated in fall 2023 and will be complete in spring 2024. In 2022, a historic decision was made to enter into an intergovernmental agreement for comprehensive fire protection and emergency medical services with Clackamas Fire District 1. The city's goal is to provide the best and most affordable fire, rescue, and emergency medical response services to the citizens of Gladstone. The agreement with Clackamas Fire District and the City of Gladstone terminates on July 1, 2023, and automatically renews for 2 consecutive 2-year terms unless terminated by either party. Labor expenses driven by increasing costs associated with retirement benefits, specifically the Public Employees Retirement System known as PERS, are expected to increase over the next several years. This biennium increase is relatively small, but it is likely to accelerate. For Gladstone, the actuary increase is an average of 1.54 percentage points to the previous rate, or 7.04% overall increase. A cost of living increase of an average of 3.5% has been factored into salary calculations. Other payroll-related benefits have remained relatively stable or increased at a manageable level for this budget. The city has 2 collective bargaining agreements: the Gladstone Police Association and American Federal of State, County, and Municipal Employees, known as AFSCME, Local 350-03. Both collective bargaining units settled new 3-year agreements that will be in effect for the 2023-2025 biennium, which expires June 30th, 2025. Utility rate fees for the water, sanitary systems, and stormwater fees are charged to customers based on the usage of the systems. The rates collected for each fund can only be used to support those individual funds' operational and capital needs. Annual revenue projections are based on historical average increases while considering planned rate increases. Planned rate increases of 4% per year are included in the 2023-2025 biennium. If these increases are not approved, budget adjustments must be made. The Police and Communications Special Levy Fund and Fire and Emergency Services Special Levy Fund are included in the budget, assuming voters approve the levies in 2023 of November. If that does not happen, the city must reduce the services in those 2 funds and make the appropriate budget adjustments. The rates have not increased since 1999, and neither levy is sustainable longer term. However, we are cognizant of the current economic conditions coming out of the pandemic and do not believe increasing the levies in this election is the best decision. The city purchased financial forecasting software to facilitate the budget process and monitor the fiscal health of the city. In addition, a capital improvement plan will be a component based on 6-year cycles to plan and utilize infrastructure projects and needs. This is an ongoing project for completion this year and will be reviewed and approved as soon as possible. Until then, capital outlay is listed in respective departments and detailed by the project and capital information for the biennium. Overall, the city mitigated pandemic impacts by closely monitoring and adjusting when necessary through conscientious planning and execution. As a result, the current biennium budget shows signs of recovery from the global health crisis, resulting in economic funding from the American Rescue Plan Agreement, known as ARPA, of $2.7 million. As mentioned in the previous budget message, these funds are available for revenue replacement to provide essential government services, and this budget reflects the utilization of $653,500 to replenish qualified funds. The city strives to maintain a healthy general fund ending fund balance of 10% of general fund unreserved revenues at a minimum, which equals $779,149 as determined by the city's financial policy. This is to be financially stable through December for the following fiscal year before property taxes are received. This year's general fund unappropriated ending fund balance before reserves is $821,908. The Gladstone community is part of the Portland metropolitan area. Gladstone has virtually no vacant land and has limited potential for a significant increase in property tax revenue from qualifying improvements, as allowed by property tax limitation commonly known as Measure 50. Infill development is occurring along with the start of a formalized downtown revitalization. We are holding steady with revenues and property taxes are solid. However, the tax-exempt properties in Gladstone, such as charitable nonprofits, religious, schools, state property, and city property, including our parks, equals approximately $901,000 in property tax revenue the city will never realize, and we need to find new revenue sources for the general fund to continue the level of services we provide. In closing, the recommended biennium budget maintains current services and uses the city's resources effectively. Management looks forward to working with the Budget Committee to review the plan and discuss alternative approaches if necessary for delivering the desired community services while maintaining financial stability and enhancing Gladstone's livability. Respectfully submitted by myself, Jackie Betts, Gladstone City Administrator.
Thank you, Administrator Betts. Are there some questions about the budget message from any members of the committee before we move on? Yes, Ron.
Just one there. I think there's a typo under the page 3, second paragraph. It should say American Federation instead of federal.
Oh, the AFSCME union?
Yeah, it's just Federation.
Federation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that sounds better.
What's their name? It's an easy typo.
The financial forecasting software of $4,500. If we have them continue to do some work, about $1,800 per year. Yes.
And, oh, go ahead.
One other quick one. On the ARPA money, is this the final expenditure of it, or is there money that's going to potentially be available 2 years out?
This will be the final expenditure of it. We have budgeted through the 24-25 biennium to fully utilize those funds. We have to have them committed by the December 31, 2024, as far as actually how we're going to spend them, actually spent by 2026.
Okay.
So we do have a year's leeway, but doubt we will use it.
This anticipates spending all of it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
And I had a question on page 3, the paragraph regarding the police and fire special levies. You have a statement, the rates have not increased since 1999 and neither levy is sustainable longer term. Can you say a little bit more what you mean by not sustainable longer term?
Well, since 1999, the rates that we've collecting have not gone up, but the cost of doing the service has. And I think that in this budget, we're maintaining service levels. If the levies don't pass, we will probably be looking at layoffs of positions because we have to cut the services that come out of those levies. And I think that it's time to have a conversation whether or not, if these levies pass for another 5 years, we could still do a mid-year election if we chose to look at increasing those levies. But as far as this budget goes, we are maintaining status quo on the levies. But the cost of doing business is going up, but we're not collecting more revenue to continue that.
61 cents per 100,000.
For police, And then-
68.
yes, and then 31 cents for fire.
So if and it's based on property? Is that what it is?
Your assessed value of your property.
So if the assessed value people are buying and selling property, that tax does go up.
It does go up, but it only goes up at a maximum of 3%. And as you know, the cost,
It's a little bit deceiving that it hasn't gone up since 1999 because it has been steadily increasing the more people resell.
the levy rate though has stayed exactly the same. The assessed value of the property may increase, but the levy rate is exactly the same. And
So,
what we're seeing is that, it pays less and less percent of the total either police or fire budget every budget cycle.
okay, so it would take a new vote to raise the rate. The revenue goes up when the property value goes up, just the same as it is with our permanent tax rate for the city.
Yes,
And we see an increase in our assessed value of about 3.5% per year because of there's the 3% that's automatic,
yes.
plus a little bit of growth because of
Yes.
properties that are modified.
Yes, yes, you're very limited as far as where you get anything over the 3%. 3% is statutorily allowed. And then the other comes from new growth or annexation.
Okay,
Mhm.
It does go, it does go up.
Our property taxes do increase. Yes, they increase every year, but they're increasing. Your assessed value is only increasing 3% a year.
Unless you sell the property.
We don't see a lot of that in Gladstone.
Mm-hmm.
So we see personally, as far as what we track on the property tax increases, it's 3.5 to 3.75. As far as what will be the increase, what the normal increases are.
and just to clarify, there are states when a sale of the property will trigger a big jump in the assessed value. But property taxes in Oregon are based on just a 3% annual increase.
Yeah.
So we don't see the vast differences in assessed value between two similar homes just because one person has lived there for 40 years and another person bought a similar property just last year. California and other states do have those big jumps. And people that have lived other places in the country, every place does it a little bit differently.
Right.
But in Oregon, those sources of revenue are pretty consistent.
Mhm.
We don't see quite the same jumps.
Yes,
So-
exactly.
So maybe you'd see a jump like that in a new build construction that's never been,
Yes, if
Purchased
new
before.
build, or if there's a major remodel done where there are permits that are filed with the county, then of course that, if the assessed value would be increased relative to whatever that remodel is. But those are some of the factors.
When I was serving on the planning commission, sometimes we get requests from large commercial properties like the car dealerships on McLaughlin to do a major remodel. And if you look at the tax assessment of those properties prior to the remodel and compare it to the tax assessment after the remodel, you see very often a rather substantial increase. And the same thing can happen at the residential level if a small property is converted into perhaps multiple housing units. There's a house near the elementary school that was a very small single-family home on a large lot. Someone bought the property, converted to a triplex, 3 housing units, and the property tax went up from something like $2,000 a year to $10,000 a year. So we do see substantial increases because of changes in a property. but not just based on change in ownership, the property stays the way. And Ron, you had another comment.
Yeah, glad we jumped into this because I had questions about it too. So what's the gap? Like, in other words, is the current levy funding 60% of police and fire?
No.
Or do we?
We will go through
Oh,
each
yes,
of
we'll get
those
into
as we get into the book. We will go through the actual police levy fund. It's separate than the police general fund. We'll go through the fire special levy fund. So we will go through those as we go through our departments tonight.
Okay. Right. And you mentioned just sort of like, it's time to have a conversation about this, which I agree with. I mean, because it's like, 1999, that's a long time. So, and as we get into it, if other parts of the city's budget are subsidizing it, I mean, the community has to have a conversation about it and what to do about it. So where does that take place? Is that more of a city council conversation, or does the budget committee have a role in that?
It could be that as we go through this process, a majority of this committee says, let's go out now and raise the police and fire levy. And that's a recommendation you could make to the city council, but ultimately it would be the city council that has to refer it to the ballot measure. And they would make that decision as to whether or not to keep it where it is for this renewal or to increase it.
And is it an option? I noticed this reference 23, the election. Is it an option to do the levy in election in 24? Or does it have to happen on off?
It has to happen November 2023 in order to start collecting it when the next one expires.
So this one will be expiring in 2024. So if we don't have the election within this year, we would have no levy to. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Kathy, I will turn it over to you to take us into more detail. I've done this process in different ways in different entities. I chaired the school district budget committee a couple of times too. Sometimes we went through things sort of section by section, just sort of got a feel of how the committee felt about it at the end of each section and then moved on. There are some major motions that are required in order to do the business that we are obligated to do as a committee. But I don't want us to get too far past a presentation before we discover that something that was presented much earlier in the meeting is something that people have some issues with. So Kathy, if you wouldn't mind presenting it sort of that way, giving us an opportunity to just react a little bit before we move on to the next section.
Absolutely.
All
If
right.
I don't ask enough times, do you have any questions? Just interrupt me. That's
All right.
absolutely fine. Okay, so I'd like to walk you through the first two sections of the budget document before you tonight for the 2023-2025 biennium. And I do have to apologize. Allergies have created havoc in my head. So if I have to stop for a second, get water, please understand. So you've also received, I'm just talking at the moment. Okay. So I will direct you when we get a little further. So you also received an analysis, and this was on your table tonight, of the budgetary ending fund balances, actual and estimated from FY 16-17 through FY 22-23. And just as a reminder, the city operates off of fiscal years, July 1 through June 30th. We go through audits every single year of our financial statements for that one, single year period. But our budget is a 2-year period. So that's why the years will change sometimes. It's important to note that almost every fiscal year shows an increase, and the effects of the utility rate increases are evident in FY 19 through 2021. The increase to the utilities fund balances will allow the city to continue the much needed infrastructure improvement projects. So we wanted to be sure and illustrate those for you there. Now, the general fund and the road and street fund show the most impact from the 2-year pandemic. Within the general fund, several state revenues were reduced, along with court fines, business licenses, planning applications, and transient lodging tax. The revenue loss calculations that we had to apply for were based on the ARPA formula that was recommended by U.S. Treasury with the actual grant submission itself. And then they are recommended to bolster up the general fund for this biennium budget. Jackie mentioned that in her message as far as the 657,000 there. The road and street fund had reduced gas tax revenue, but that was fortunately partially offset by the vehicle registration tax implemented by Clackamas County and came into effect right at the time the pandemic started. So that helped there. The good news is that all these revenue categories are showing steady signs of recovery this year, and expected into the future, which was the purpose of this graph here in this illustration. We get a lot of questions about that as far as whether our revenues are. Our revenues are very stable. You don't see a lot of peaks and valleys, even within the revenues, except unless we have something go through like the rate adjustments for water, sewer, et cetera. Then going to the introduction section, which on page 5 is our budget calendar. And that will detail out the rest of the budget adoption process. Should another meeting be needed after tonight, it will be noticed and noticed next week and then held on May 30th of 2023. The council is scheduled to adopt the approved budget on June 13th, 2023. The final legal date is June 30th to comply with Oregon budget law. So going to any questions about that? Going to the next page. We have updated the format on the city organizational chart to enhance readability. If you saw our previous ones, you would have seen they were in about a 2 font. They were very tiny. So we're trying to make this a little bit bigger. Please bear in mind that this chart lists all personnel, including volunteers and contracted services, under their home departments. This will not necessarily tie to the summary of FTEs that are presented later in the budget book. And moving a page forward. The council goals were presented in a condensed format of the annual goal setting report and enhances the readability of the document. Overall, the budget user guide, which is several more pages in, page 17, thank you, Jackie. So this budget user guide here provides much of the same information that was discussed at the budget orientation meeting that was held on April 24th, covering the process, the procedure, and the fund structure of the city. That basically takes you first through that first section of the budget summary. Any questions on that? So now we're going to start talking numbers. Okay, so page 25 here under the budget summary section details all the revenue that's received within the city by category. As noted, charges for services and our local taxes are the largest revenue sources. If you go to page 26, it starts to go through a little bit more detail on the revenues themselves, what comprises them, and then also what we use when it comes to the calculation of not only our estimated revenues that we'll be receiving within this biennium, but what we are looking for then for the next 2 years. One of the things that's a little tricky with a biennium budget is the beginning and ending fund balances. And I won't take you through the exercise now, but if anybody ever has any questions about it, please be sure and let me know. The first paragraph on here gives I think, a good explanation of how it works, but it almost looks like new math because first year plus second year equals first year. So in that sense, and it's because you have to look at it as a starting number, all revenues, all expenditures coming to an ending number within that 2-year period. So as I say, if you have any questions about it, please let me know.
Kathy? So if I look at the top of page 25, line 3,000, you have some things are for the biennium, some things for a fiscal year. So the last 2 columns in that page usually are one fiscal year plus the next fiscal year equals the total.
Right.
But on the very top line for
Yeah,
beginning of fund balance,
exactly.
that's the one that's scary because
Yes.
it looks like we started with 23 million at the beginning and then we were down to 4 million. And you're not saying we're going to have a $19 million loss in that first year.
Correct.
So explain why that those numbers
How
seem.
and how it works. And if you would also to flip at the same time to the page 33. Nope, page 31. Yes, page 31, which is the expenditure summary by category there. If you take, as you mentioned there, Mayor, proposed budget plus proposed budget, those are the two individual fiscal years. And then the last column will be the combined for the biennium. We're starting with a beginning fund balance at the beginning of the biennium, 23,660,000. If you take all of the revenues and then less all the expenditures for the first fiscal year, that would bring you to that 4,270,575. And remember, we front load expenditures here. So if we have a lot of money available for capital, we're going to front load it into the first fiscal year, carry over anything that is not spent into the second fiscal year. That's why our first fiscal year always looks so expensive, okay? So it comes to that 4,270,000. Then if you take all of the revenues anticipated that second year, less all of the expenditures budgeted for the second year, you would come down to an ending fund balance of 2,567,105. So it's a flow. It's a flow of funds that comes through. And that contingency amount, if you see on the expenditure summary by category, you look 2 lines up on the numbers there for 9,100, and it says contingency. That number of 2,567,000 is what our net funds left over after the 2 years will be.
What type of miscellaneous revenues do we have? What are those streams?
Oh, I'll get to those in just a minute. Okay. All right. So is that enough of an explanation at
Yes.
this point on that?
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move ahead. Local taxes, our local taxes consist of property taxes within the general police and fire levy funds, transient lodging taxes, and vehicle registration taxes. Again, through the pandemic, our transient lodging taxes took a severe hit, but we are seeing those come back. Property taxes include the general fund base rate mentioned earlier of 4.8174 per thousand on the assessed value. And then I include a 3.5% growth rate in there for inflation and growth. And then the levy taxes are also increased by that 3.5%. Again, I review the county information that we receive on an annual basis regarding our total property tax collections in the county. It does a very good job on it and usually ends up collecting 95 to 96% of taxes fully assessed. So all collections are budgeted. We budget them though at 95% of the levy amount for each fiscal year. As I was saying, TLT is 6% of all lodging stays under 30 days and took a significant hit, but we're growing. The city has 2 hotels and then several short-term rentals within our boundaries. Vehicle registration tax began during the 1921 biennium and has been a significant help within roads and streets. Our state shared revenues are commonly referred to as sin taxes because it's basically marijuana, liquor, cigarettes, and more liquor. Those are the 4 that we get there. More liquor. Yes, they have 2 different calculation methods for it. Usually they are based on our population is the developed formula. So basically the state notifies us you're going to get X amount dollars per person in your city. So we don't have a lot of flexibility on that one. It is whatever the state mandates. And when they decided after the marijuana taxes went in, then a few years later, they decided we were getting way too much and they took about 2/3 of it and left us with 1/3, all of the cities. So we, as I say, we don't have a lot of flexibility there. Charges for services applies in general fund, but are most impactful in the utility funds. After the 2 years of significant increases, we are only going to be looking at future revenue increases at an inflationary level during this.
Just trying to figure out.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going through this here. Yes, page 28. Yes, the headers here. Yes, yeah.
So we're at the bottom of 28.
Yes, charges for services there, and then talking about the utility fees there. So I have not illustrated every single thing in here. Most, as I say, most of the information is in here to be able to give you more of a background basis on that. The grant revenue, which I did want to bring up here as far as what we are showing, it consists of the anticipated traffic safety grants that we receive from ODOT. Good neighbor grants we receive from Water Environmental Services every year. The nature park grant from Oregon Recreation and Parks, we're estimating 100,000 will be coming in from that. And then the balance of the ARPA funds. And that was we'll get into that as far as how much is there in the ARPA funds available there.
Kathy, I have a quick question about
Yes.
grants. So you mentioned that revenues are fairly stable.
Yes.
Grants seem like that would be an area that's a little more volatile.
It's extremely volatile.
Yeah. So of the 2.6 million that we
Uh-huh.
have as estimated revenue,
Mhm.
how much of that is like, how confident are we in that funding level? And are those already awarded grants, or are those
Yes.
grants that we just feel pretty good about?
Yes. We have not been technically awarded the 100,000 from Oregon Parks and Rec, but it is quite positive on that. Other than that, there are grants that either historically we've been able to get every single year, such as the ODOT traffic grant. That is a given pretty much. Or ARPA, needless to say, is in the bank. Basically, we're only recognizing that as we spend it. They gave us the 2.6 right off the bat. So at least we're earning interest earnings off of that, which has been nice. Any grant that is anticipated in the budget is offset by a corresponding expenditure. If we don't get the grant, the expenditure is not made. So it's a net zero impact in that sense.
And
Yes.
I'll give you an example of one that we did not include in here. So the city recently applied for a raise infrastructure fund for improvements on Portland Avenue. And we applied for 1.54 million. We may know within the next couple of months if we get that, but we didn't put it in here because it's an unknown. The $100,000 one is to do the paved loop at the nature park. And we've received a notification that we've been awarding it. But like Kathy said, it's usually historically, we know the traffic safety, it's a given. We get those every year. But there will be some grant opportunities happening in the next year or two that we will apply for, but there's just no way to anticipate them in the budget.
Great. And then all those expenditures would be contingent on the grant.
Exactly.
So it all just ends as a net.
Yes.
Yeah, net zero.
And you may remember that there's been several times over the last few years, we have brought budget amendments to the council when we have received grants that were unanticipated and not included in the budget. So we make the budget adjustment at that time, increase revenues, increase expenditures. And
Are there any evidence that we're waiting on? I think you just mentioned one.
Yeah.
Is there any ones that we're-
Yeah, so as what's illustrated here on the bottom of 29, we allocated some funds towards a grant writer, and she's monitoring those right now. We don't have any other active applications in there, but this is one area that even though grants aren't free money, we know it costs money to apply for them. I believe the raise infrastructure, is that the only one, Darren, that you know of that we have?
Yeah, that's the only one we're working on right now.
Yep. But stay tuned because there are potentially other infrastructure projects that we may be able to apply for.
It sounds like you guys need to hire a grant writer.
We have one.
Oh, I thought this was a contract.
It is, yes, it is, yes, we do. And then you had mentioned what our miscellaneous revenues are. So jumping ahead a little bit on page 36 of the general fund, there is a category there of miscellaneous. So that will give you some idea of what our miscellaneous revenues are. Many are stemming from the senior center, and then the all other general fund receipts. Those are miscellaneous, different types of public works permits, various things. It's, just little things that tend to add up over the year. So it's not, again, if there's ever any question about wanting to know detail on anything like that, we can certainly provide it. Okay.
I have a question for you. I know that when we go,
Microphone,
I'm sorry.
microphone.
I know that when we go out for a grant, just so everybody understands, money isn't always free. Jackie has to look at them, Administrator Betts looks at them very carefully because sometimes they're a match. Well, if it's $1 million, yeah, that's a lot of money. But another $1 million out of our budget is an enormous amount of money. And there are times we've had to pass on awesome grants that we just don't have the money to match it. So I think that our administrator and staff have done a very good job at vetting the grants that we've gotten and gone after them really hard in order to get them for our community. And I think it's been a good, we've had a really good about 5-year stream of some decent grants that have come in. A big one was the dock at the at Meldrum Bar it just fell into place and it was the right thing at the right time. And we've gotten others like that. So
that's a very good point. And a lot of times people will go, well, there's so much money out there available. Why isn't the city going after it? And it does require a match. And if we don't have the match, we can't apply. And also to give you an example on that RAISE grant that we applied for $1.5 million, it cost us, the grant writer, $8,000 to prepare the application. So there are costs associated with going after grant funds.
Right. And always an extensive amount of staff time, even with a grant writer, we're the ones providing the information to, submit the grant. So it really can add up. Moving to page 22 of the expenditure summary. I apologize. I got, wait, hang on 2 seconds. I have myself there. Okay, back to page 31 here. The expenditure summary by category for all funds there.
Page 31.
Yes, page 31. Thank you.
I'll keep that because I know that's important.
There. Some notable items in personnel services there, as you see, and these are all summarized again, all by category, all funds. Jackie has touched on many of these things. Just to reiterate a little bit. Overall, there was a $3 million reduction with the merging of Clackamas Fire Department into Clackamas Fire District 1, Gladstone Fire Department into District 1. That money for that $3 million in personnel costs there was transferred under to materials and services category. Reason being, we're not paying the staff and the associated costs anymore. Now it is moved to materials and services to make the contractual payments to Clackamas Fire District 1. So that is one of the huge increases you will see there in materials and services. And if you look at the budget there on the biennium 21-23, that is the final budget, the budget that was adopted, plus any budget adjustments that have been done to date through that period of time. It would be through June 30th, 2023. So that number may change even possibly. But if you look at the proposed biennium materials and services, you'll see that the difference is roughly 3.2 million. Much of that is from that fire department merger moving over to there. Overall, between a 3.5% average cost of living increase over the 2 years and increased benefits Personnel costs decreased a net of 5.84% or 1 million under the previous biennium. Both city bargaining units, as mentioned, have settled into new contracts that is very helpful. It's now in line with our budget years, so it provides stability through the budget cycle. The PERS rates, as Jackie had mentioned, had an average increase of 1.54% in the rates. There are 3 different rates we deal with as far as tier 1 or 2 you may have heard of. There's OPSRP, and then there's public safety OPSRP also. Overall, PERS went up 7.04% of, as far as our total cost of PERS increased by that amount. And as always, the future will depend much on the ongoing interest earnings and legislative decisions. Again, outside of our control on that, but it is amazing whenever interest earnings go up, how much that helps to factor down our rates. It's a huge influencer. Payroll benefits have stayed relatively stable with an increase of 4.38% overall, including PERS. Notably, there were less drastic increases in medical rates than anticipated after the 2 years of the pandemic. And it had an increased cost overall of 7.2% net of the fire district personnel. Another data point for benefits that we look at closely is the percentage overall of to salaries. There has been only a 0.09% increase to a total of 59.08% total over the previous biennium with the reduction of the fire department. So that's basically telling you that on an average and citywide, every employee we have has 59% in benefits over on top of their salary. Higher paid employees have a lower percentage, lower paid employees have a higher percentage. And here's our average on that. The net reduction in personnel of 2.45 FTE positions has been reconciled on the summary of FTE, not wanting you to turn to it quite yet, but back on page 91. And we'll be reviewing that, as I say, later in the meeting. Overall, materials and services have stayed within inflationary increases. Staff was excellent about keeping it basically under the 3% that we strive for.
How many fire personnel did we lose?
We lost a total of 6 full-time fire.
And you still went over?
So over in what? What do you mean?
It says, any increase in only 0.09 over the previous for the payroll benefit rate.
Oh, no, this is in total. This is, we lost 6 employees, but it only netted out to 2.45 employees with ones we hired versus the ones we lost. Yes, yeah. You make me think, keep me on my toes. So going forward then, as I say, materials and services, basically just 2.14% overall, even with the increase of the 3.1 million, largely due to the fire contract. And as mentioned earlier, funds are accumulating within capital outlay for reserves for equipment and vehicle replacement and infrastructure improvements. Debt service, we have, I didn't go into debt service too much here, but I apologize. Turn the page there, you see the explanation on the personnel, the materials, a little bit more background information there.
Page 32.
Yes. And then over on 33 debt service, we have 4 debt issues. There is a schedule further back on the debt service if you are curious as far as what those are, et cetera. There's a 2016 refunding on a water note. The 2 2018 notes that were issued on the Civic Center construction, and then the new note that we just issued in 2022 for the 5 million for the Public Works facility.
Is that fully amortized or is it a fully amortized?
They're fully amortized. Yes, yes. Yeah, we don't like balloon payments, and yes, it can make it a little bit difficult. We do always have prepayment capabilities on it if for some reason there was a windfall.
Penalty note?
Not at all. Yes. Basically, it's also too because of the type of debt structure that we have on a full faith and credit. So it's the whole credit and credit worthiness of the city that is guaranteeing those. The transfers out reflect the broadening of our cost allocation model that we implemented last biennium to include both administration and information technology. These disbursements allow recovery in the general fund of costs that are citywide related. Are there any questions on those sections?
I have one question, and it's not here. It was just one I had the other day. When we get our packet and you go down to these line items and it'll say percentage used, 124, 113, then it'll say like only 89 or whatever. And you get to the very bottom, that's all that matters. If
You
were-
got it.
If you were 98% or whatever.
Right.
But how about the ones that say percentage used and at the very bottom, it's like at 102? Does that have to be money transferred back in to make that right? Or is that just something you write and say we went over?
It depends. And if you're talking about, I've got a budget adjustment coming to we just did one on the URA. And that would be about the only one that I know of that was over. If you notice something else, please follow up with me and I can give you an explanation. But the URA is concerned as far as going over budget.
Okay,
for
I just wondered how
the
it worked.
fiscal year.
Yeah, when I
Yes,
get it, I
and-
look at
and
the
we-
bottom of them. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Now, if you're looking at a category, Greg, so if it's like personnel services shows under and the material and services shows over, counterbalance, it's the bottom line. We adopt by operating budget. It's the method of adoption that we have when it's something we do have full capability of.
Okay, I just think I saw
Yes.
one that said like 104 at the bottom and
Well,
I,
if you've got, if there is something like that, please.
okay, let you know.
come
All
and-
right. okay,
Yeah,
all right,
talk with
thank
me
you.
about it. Thank you.
I have a question regarding the fire department shift. Was that, I guess I don't know the motivation behind that change. Was that strictly financial or were there other reasons why that was performed?
Jackie, address that.
Yeah, I can address that now or when we get to the fire department, but high level, we didn't have enough paid on calls to cover all of the shifts. And we didn't have a paramedic on duty 24/7. And I think through COVID, the loss of the paid on calls because the standards have changed for training and certifications to remain a firefighter. We stretched it as long as we could, but when it got to a point where it was impacting the level of services that the citizens were receiving, that's when we had to start talking to Clackamas Fire. And it took 2 to 3 years to have those conversations. But that's really what started is Gladstone is an anomaly. We had a few paid time, full-time employees, but most of it was run by what's called paid on calls. And I would say that the pandemic was probably the last straw where the fire chief was having difficulty covering all of the shifts 24/7.
So the next section of your budget is the general fund information. And that's leading off with general fund revenues. These have been conservatively estimated as normally practiced, but with an economic recognition that we are seeing a return to normalcy in most areas. And with that, if there's any other questions regarding the general fund revenues, be more than happy to answer them. But now we're going to start into our departmental discussions, and I will turn it over to Jackie for that.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
do have
Oh,
just two
yes,
quick
please.
questions about the general fund.
Yeah.
So it looked like parking permits, there was a significant drop in estimated revenue from parking permits.
Mhm. Yes.
And then I was scratching my head and I'm like, where do we even have parking permits? Is that just Meldrum Bar?
It's Meldrum Bar,
Okay.
and we initially based the budget amount of that budget of 500,000, which of course was 250 for each year, based on the outside consultant study that had been done. And that, of course, included parking permits being charged to everyone who used the park. And then when the council made the decision to back it off on residents, needless to say, we saw a drastic drop on
Got it.
revenues there.
Yeah,
Cool. So
and we
Yes.
agree that was the right decision because Gladstone residents pay a percentage property taxes to the parks. But yes, that first number that was assessed from Eco Northwest was if we took all the citizens in Gladstone,
Yeah,
that would be the revenue.
it makes sense. So this is this is just a result of the decision that council made
Right.
to pull
Yes.
back.
Right. And so
Totally makes
now we're
sense.
down to a more realistic level.
Great, okay. And then my second question was, it looks like we have more than doubling in the estimated revenue from planning application fees. I'm wondering if you could just add more color there.
That again was also something that was impacted quite a bit from the pandemic as far as just almost a stoppage of any type of work that was going on there. We have seen it start to normalize again and coming up. As you can see back in the 2019 actuals, at that point, we had received in 108,000 in the 2-year period. And then it went drastically down. And so we're forecasting just a conservative 80,000 for the biennium, but are comfortable we should be realizing that.
Awesome, thank you.
Go ahead.
Question. So what is our surplus today for
Sir,
ending 2023?
oh, for the ending for 2023,
Yes.
the estimated on that is where our beginning fund balance is at the 26 million. Bearing in mind, 23,660,000, that's the surplus. That is including every single dollar the city has, including all water, sewer, wastewater monies, roads, et cetera. So we are carrying forward again, a large capital improvement budget that will be utilized throughout this.
What's the net of both that improvement? Do you have?
I'm sorry?
What's the net of that improvement, capital improvement?
Net of that improvement is going to be coming down to as budgetarily down to the 2,000,003, which we show it as far as the expenditure goes. Yes. As far as total
And in your
expenditures.
experience, is that too much? Is that,
The 23?
yeah.
No, and as you go through the entire budget, if you look at it and see and all of them show what their beginning balances are on a per fund basis. And that's what's really critical to look at because then you can see where the money is sitting. So as we go through it, it's a good key to look at it there. Also, dear, where was that? Chart that I handed out that basically showed you the, I'm sorry, I've got it buried here. Here we go. For the budgetary ending fund balances, this will all show you by fund as far as what the ending fund balances are per fund, and historically going back to 16, 17. So you can see how it weighs out. Our rule of thumb is for the general fund, because the general fund is basically supported by property taxes. And and there we have 10% of revenues is what we strive for our ending fund balance. And then throughout the other funds, we normally keep roughly about a 400,000 contingency that we put back on that for all of the other funds. And then it's any unspent funds that are then committed into the next cycle.
I have a question for you. PGE is going after a 14% rate hike. Are we going to see any of that or is ours a set base? Because I couldn't remember.
We get 5% on our franchise tax. So if their revenues go up, our revenues go up.
Okay.
And yes, I built in that 14%.
You think they're going to get it, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, pain.
I know, I'm PGE also. Most of us in the metro area hear you there, but yeah.
Well, Oak Lodge Water Services is looking at a 40% increase tomorrow night.
Yes.
And that would affect about 800 customers in Gladstone,
This might be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
How many customers? I'm sorry?
about 800.
So that, of course, is the pass-through rate. They tell us how much to charge. We assess it against the customers and then we turn around and pay it all back to them. So Old Clodge will be on speed dial.
Okay.
I was gonna wait for later, it was probably a good time. So on our city buildings and property, do we already have renewable energy on them? Like,
Yes,
really?
Darren would probably be the one to speak to that.
We do on the civic building here, we have solar panels on there. It's depending on the dollar amount of a building, depends on what you have to put in there as far as renewable energy. Obviously, they build them as energy efficient as you can with the LED, everything like that. But it's really based off of the dollar amount as to what dollar amount you need to spend on renewable energy.
Yeah, that's really helpful. The reason I just brought it up was that, are we looking at like all the incentives under the Inflation Reduction Act? Because there's like 30 to 50% now that for the first time ever, cities can get it. School districts can get it. It's not just private. It's like, it really changes the economics, and
It
well, it
does.
changes, it's not, you're gonna have like, it's one of those things you gotta look years out to get the true savings, because you have to pay for the stuff up front, but it dramatically reduces the payback times. I just don't know if city council was looking at that or public works, because
We do assess all of those types of incentives, and it gets back to kind of like we mentioned with the grants too. There's some that require matching, but like the public works facility didn't meet the dollar threshold in order for us to do the same type of incentives. But yes, we are always looking and assessing to see if there's value in doing these projects. I know the new Gladstone Library is doing some incentives, but that is a county project that they're going after for those. But yes, the short answer is that we do assess those and look at them.
okay, yeah, because I know the IRA is so new, a lot of people haven't got that data out, and it's good, it's out there for 10 years, and it's not a grant, you just, if you meet the criteria, boom, you get the money back.
Correct.
So it's kind of a cool program, so.
But there again, don't you like the grants, if we can't match it, don't you have the money to have the money to put up?
So, yeah,
get
so,
the incentive down
yeah,
the
so
road?
the way that this works is like, that you have to figure out how to finance it on the
Right,
front end.
right, okay.
But there's a whole bunch of options. There's green banks and there's banks that will actually just do it. But the big difference that's new with the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, is that for the first time ever, nonprofits and governments can get that money as a direct payment. It's because it's normally tax credit, so it's only good for private sector or private citizens who pay taxes. But so it's a huge new thing that in a lot of cases, like literally cuts in half the payback time. So instead of taking, say, 15 or 16 years to pay back, it can be paid off in 8. And then you're just getting all the savings going forward. So it's a little bit of a longer term vision thing to save money.
That's it.
Yeah, but like I said, a lot of times you can get like what are called like bridge loans. There's different financing ways to do that. I just want to make sure we're looking at it. Thanks.
But to summarize, we are meeting our 10% requirement in a general fund, which, high level Gladstone really is a conservative approach. We spend within our means. We don't have a lot of debt. A lot of cities do. And a lot of cities always they'll figure out how to pay for things later down the road. And we don't do that in Gladstone. We're very conservative, and we're very cognizant of the incomes that people in Gladstone can afford. And that kind of gets back to what we were talking about with raising the police and fire levies. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go through, I think your next tab is general fund, and we're going to go through the departments. And I'm going to take administration first. It's on page 39 and 40. And then when our departments, whether it's public works, police, or senior center, they will come up and join us and go through them as they will. We really tried to simplify this, and what you have on the administration is to high level talk about some noteworthy items that we did a couple years ago. to make sure you understand that administration is the department. We provide the organizational and business management. So you've got the city council, financial services, customer service, human resources, risk management, records management, and planning services. So these are really the areas that contribute to all of the departments within the city, that we help them with that. And what you'll see on page 40 is the budget highlights that our administration line item is going to support citywide for that. So if you look at administration, we are not going through these line item, as that's really not the role of the budget committee, but certainly if we had a spike in one area that we didn't in the previous one, we will call attention to that. But what you can see from the materials and services is the type of expenditures that do come out of there. What I wanted to note is in material and services, number 510020 and 21, those two categories are what will fund the economic development and tourism coordinator positions. That is transient lodging tax, which we're required by state law to spend that a certain percentage on actual tourism. And then we also get revenue from our business licenses for that. So is there any questions that anybody has in administration expenditures?
Are you looking to hire a service or are you looking to hire an employee?
For economic development, it is a city employee 2-year limited duration. In other words, we want to see how it goes as a city employee. Okay. So Chair, if you're fine, I'm going to move on to information technology. Okay. Do you want to go ahead, Kathy, on this one?
This one. So the information technology manager provides support citywide for all the hardware, software, networking, mobile infrastructure, and strategic technical planning. Cybersecurity is a top concern and preventatives are constantly evaluated and implemented to ensure a secure system. The equipment stays up to date, utilizing a replacement cycle that we developed back in 2019, 2021, with a constant review for the best use of funds. Robert is very innovative on that and has come up with some great ideas there. He's also quite a negotiator and gets some great prices. Information technology is part of our cost allocation plan, as I've mentioned earlier. So the costs that benefit all city departments can be distributed and recovered back to the general fund to help support that department. Much was accomplished in this last biennium and significant projects are planned for 23-25, such as upgrades and replacements to servers and desktop systems. And then turning to, next one is facilities on page 45.
Our Public Works Director, Darren Canaparoli, will come up and address facilities.
Good evening. Facilities, the city is responsible for maintaining all of our city-owned facilities. That includes this building, Public Works, Fire Station, Senior Center, the Senior Center. Some of the noteworthy things, the big one is that's in this budget is a building reserve account. We have not currently had one of those, and we are starting that going forward. That will help us save for larger expenditures down the road when they're needed, such as roofs that are very expensive, things like that. So we'll have a kind of a little nest egg set in there for future expenditures going forward. And then, of course, the Public Works facility, that is in this budget. We'll have that done hopefully in the spring of 2024. Overall, the budget for the most part has stayed pretty equal. There isn't any really large changes within the budget. Contract personnel services is probably the biggest line item that's gone up the most. And that's, most of that is inflationary stuff. We have HVAC systems that need to be maintained, pest control, janitorial's another large one. All the fire systems that need to be maintained and the monitoring of those fire systems. And then, electrical contractors, that type of a thing. The other one obviously is utilities. That one's gone up quite a bit, but like they mentioned, as far as rates going up, they're going up for everybody. So yes, we have to pay for our own utilities as well. If you look down in the capital, you can see the building reserve fund there. We've set aside $20,000 for that for the next or over the next 2 years. And then you'll see the Public Works facility that's in there as well. Any questions?
It was funded when necessary. So these other numbers that you would see were for specific builds at that time.
And I think a good point that Mr. Canaparoli made is that even though we're contracting for fire services with Clackamas Fire, we still own the Gladstone Fire Station. And as you can see, we just did a remodel inside, but we are required to maintain that facility.
What's at the bottom, what's FTE count? 'Cause I'm sure there's more than 1.1 people for this department. What is that referring to?
So that we currently, in our current budget that we're in, we have a half a FTE that does facilities, and then you'll have some admin costs and stuff like that that'll be in that. We're hoping to make that a full-time position in this biennium.
So it's really 1.1 people in the whole entire department.
It's incredibly,
Wow. Okay.
yes, we are a very lean organization,
Wow.
very lean.
All right. Y'all surviving?
We make do.
On here, you don't mention the library building. We do own that building. Are we just not gonna take care of it for the next 2 years?
That is under a different agreement that the county has to maintain that, but that is property that we own, but we don't have to do the same level of facility maintenance on it. The county's responsible for that.
Okay. And then, where was my other question? Oh, your building reserve. Darren, I couldn't put a roof on my house for $20,000. What were you gonna do with that?
Well, the idea is to continue to add to that every biennium until we get enough money to be able to do that. I mean, if you look at most of our buildings, using the roof as an example, are fairly new.
Yeah.
And by the time, they come into needing to be replaced, we're hoping to have enough money there to be able to do that instead of, trying to budget for that separately.
So if an HVAC system went out somewhere, where are we gonna find that?
We've got money with our O&M that should pay for some of that. Obviously, it's not going to pay for everything.
Okay.
If we did have to go into that fund, we would have to go into that to do that. Obviously, HVAC systems are expensive.
Yes.
But again, most of the infrastructure as far as facilities is fairly new.
Okay.
So hopefully we don't have issues like that.
Good information.
Yeah.
So so these reserve funds then are not, this is not an expectation that you will spend this money to repair something. You will set this money aside and it will stay in a segregated fund of some kind that keeps accumulating. Is that right?
Yes, and then spent as needed.
As needed, yes.
Yes, we won't have a separate category elsewhere. It's just, those funds are growing for that purpose. And they're used for specific purposes, as far as more asset-related expenditures.
And I appreciated Councilor Garland's comment because it is kind of, we can relate it to our own needs in that regard. we should all have a fund like this, be setting aside money for our own houses, roof or air conditioning or our car. And some of us do, and most of us probably don't. But at the city level, it's certainly prudent to do so. And we appreciate you putting this in. And it's understandable that, the building that this building replaced, we did not feel the need to invest a lot more in it, knowing that it was going to be coming down. But now that we have everything new in here, now is the time to begin that good practice of setting aside funds so that when things, hopefully years from now begin breaking down, we're ready to take care of it.
Yeah, 10, 15 years from now, if you do this every year, you'll have enough there to take care of it. The senior center roof is new. This is new. Public Works facility will be new. And so that's where we do an assessment. And now is the time for us to start thinking about the future for that.
And you'll note throughout the budget, we have several reserves set up for either equipment items or building needs or improvements of some sort or another. Again, coming back to more our large asset items.
Yeah, I think we're probably familiar with that practice with regard to vehicles and the equipment used in the Public Works Department. Not so much facilities, but the other is where we've always done a good job and had a good procedure for at what point we make those expenditures.
I would like to share one big expenditure that having gone to a couple of meetings in county with other cities, Gladstone paid cash for their fire truck. That is almost unheard of, that we actually put money in the piggy bank and paid for it, because other cities and municipalities scramble to get loans for a vehicle that may or may not be a lemon maybe, or it just wasn't exactly what they wanted. And we knew what we wanted. And I'm not going to say I was in on the whole thing because it was going on before I got there, but hats off to Gladstone for doing that, because you save a lot of money in interest rates on a vehicle for $400,000, as we all know with our home loans.
And so that's not being pulled from a separate fund or anything. I mean, like I've asked you before, right? If we don't have enough money, why can't we just take a little money from here or take a little money from this to put the park or something? You say that's not legal. But so these are just reserves, and each department can set up something to have a reserve for everything.
If we have available funds to be able to do it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Some caveat there.
Okay. Gotta have the money.
Mhm. Thank you, Darren.
All right, any more? No, okay. Thank you, Jerry.
It's his birthday today.
Be nice.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Cutting loose early.
Yeah. So our next department then is municipal court expenditures. And the Gladstone Municipal Court ensures that municipal ordinances are recognized and enforced in the areas of public safety and traffic safety. Amy Lindgren is our presiding judge, and she has ensured accountability of court fines and citations, resulting in recovery of court-related revenues. Again, we were, even prior to the pandemic, we were starting to see a downward slide in our court revenues coming in, and did some in-depth investigation as to what was going on as far as why we were not, our revenues were dropping. And a lot of various reasons that it was happening, but with our new judge and further emphasis from our traffic police as far as putting through the citations and actually requiring that they be paid, we have been able to see a recovery back in our court fines and forfeitures. Other beneficial practices that were put into place, such as the partnership with the Bybee Lake Hope Center, which provides homeless services to the community, have also been implemented to help the community. And as you can see by the line items for the municipal court department, it's again a very lean department. There are only 2 employees in there. And then we have contractual services for the judge, a prosecuting attorney, and the attorneys for indigent clients. So
we have a very efficient court system that is looked to by other cities We have an amazing judge that holds people accountable with compassion. And we have a police chief that believes that his officers should be visible, educating the public, and when warranted, writing citations. And so all of that has really changed the dynamic of our municipal court system.
I have a question, Kathy. So looking at line items 500-132 and 500-134, it looks like the costs or the expected expense of prosecuting attorneys went up by about $12,000, but our costs for attorneys for indigent clients went down by about $10,000. I would expect those numbers to, you know, if we're just looking at volumes of cases, I would expect those numbers to rise and fall together. Are Gladstonians just have more money now that they can afford their own lawyers, or, you know, any thoughts around that?
Yes, and a lot, also too, a lot of the indigent clients are not from Gladstone. So, you know, I mean, it depends on who is cited within our city limits, et cetera. But no, the contract for the prosecuting attorney, what they negotiated, that is what went up. And as far as the attorneys for the indigent clients, that is more random as far as who our attorneys are and the number of cases that they are assigned. So it's been pretty conservatively budgeted, but pretty accurate. Yeah.
I also had a question about that. I know that Oregon has a dearth of public, indigent public defenders. Do we know how we're doing here? Like, has anybody, you know, is there a percentage or number of people who can't find representation who would be eligible?
I can't answer that question, but we would certainly be able to get information on that from our court manager, Tony Hale. Yes.
And we're required to provide the service if somebody asks for that.
Yes.
And the other interesting to note is the interpreter services has gone up considerably. So we have some employees that are bilingual. And so if they're on duty and can provide a service, if somebody is at the counter that speaks Russian or Spanish and needs help, our employees will help with that. But oftentimes when they have to go to court, you have to have a certified interpreter. And so there's a nice side hustle for anybody interested because they are actually making about $450 per court appearance to come and just interpret for somebody who's going before the judge. But that is something that we had to increase a little bit in our budget for that. I encourage all of you to come and watch a court session. It is quite fascinating to do that.
Right. So now we are on to the police.
Well, we have the most important budget to talk about now, and our police chief will come up and he'll tell you it's the most important budget.
Okay, it's the most important budget. Good evening. A little bit about your police department. Besides crime prevention and visibility that was already shared, I do want to clarify with citations. As you've seen, we've done a real good course correction. The goal of the Gladstone Police Department is not to punish our community, it's to educate our community. And if you look at our monthly reports, which we put one out every month with statistics in it, you'll find that probably 50% or less of the people we stop, we cite, which means 50% or more get off on warnings, that we think that will correct the behavior itself. So I think that's a key. And I learned that years ago, that it's very, very important to educate our community and not punish our community. We've all seen what happens in places around the country when you just do something, you know, just punish your community through citations and fines. I don't think that's correct. So, but at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. And we're doing that. But besides the visibility and everything, your police department handles criminal investigations, you know, obviously traffic enforcements and city code violations, as well as dog control. The police department has its police officers that includes a canine. The office of support staff that consists of an executive assistant, one records position, and one part-time evidence technician. There's currently a reserve officer who serves in a variety of support functions, along with patrol officers on duty 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So you always have 24/7 law enforcement presence. I want to share a little bit of noteworthy items from this last budget we're going through is body cams. You'll see me wearing those. Those are a key for us moving forward as law enforcement, obviously to build trust within the community, to show, and it's been extremely helpful for us as we do our investigations, as we do conduct everyday work. So we're able to see that and view that. If a citizen complaint comes in, we can actually view what that looks like as the administration goes. And there's certain systems in place where only supervisors can see that, right? And so if a complaint, you can't delete the equipment, you can't delete anything. It's everything's tracked, everything's timestamped. So. And then another one that you'll see moving forward too is benchmark analytics. This is something that we're trying to get the police department to move back into the 21st century a little bit and keeping track with going with a cloud-based system. And we want the benchmark one, it's fiscally responsible, I believe, and it's a great product. Other cities have gone to this. It'll track for its community engagement, use of force, training, personnel evaluations, our officer wellness program, and internal investigation, citizen complaints, after actions, and also have officers' emergency contacts. The best part about this system is we can hit, instead of taking a few hours to try and get percentages on analytics, we can just push a button and it'll all come up. So we put the data in and here it comes. So that's actually fantastic. So as you look at, one of the other big things is the award ceremony. COVID prevented us from doing a lot of different things. I was hired in 2019. Shortly after that, we got into a lot of stuff in 2020, COVID and everything else. So we finally were able to have an award ceremony for our employees. And that was a huge success. And a lot of people were recognized for the good work they were doing and well-deserved. Moving forward for this biennium, some of the highlights that I'll share is our wellness program. If we take care of our people, I truly believe they'll take care of our community. And that's where my focus is making sure we're doing the right things, we're standing by our values, and we're taking care, keeping the health of our officers well so that they can keep the health and welfare of our community well. A community academy, we're looking at that. We need people to understand what your police department's doing. There's always a lot of questions. And I love when the mayor asked me a bunch of questions at last city council about stuff. It was just an opportunity to educate and an opportunity to get asked questions and answer those questions. And so that's what this is about. So, all the way down to hiring requirements, the training components, the legal, what's truly our authority, what we can't do. And we're limited too. So, and then we get into benchmark analytics again. We've only been able to focus on 2 modules. There's a bunch of modules. So we're continuing to develop that system. That's going to be enhance what we do in the field and provide to the community. And then traffic enforcement is another goal. We mentioned grants, ODOT grants that we get. We can't provide the traffic education, the traffic safety without these grants. We are, as Administrator Betts has shared, we are a very lean organization. We don't have the extra bodies. And so we have to make do and make use of what we have. And we do a real good job. You have real good police officers out there. And they do a fantastic job. But without these grants, I can't put more than 2 people out. And between the calls for service, the follow-up, the reporting on top of that, and to be able to continue to do traffic enforcement would be extremely difficult. So these ODOT grants help, and traffic safety is a priority. And then the community input strategic planning, I've actually, I've had this since 2019, and we're finally going to be able to get to it because of COVID and everything else. We did an internal strategic plan, and now we get the opportunity to see, are we hitting the mark? Is this really in line with what the community wants to do? It wants us to focus on. And so we get some good feedback that way because we're representing Gladstone and nobody else. So we want to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And then you can look at our budget. It's it's lean compared, it's to the point. I think there's a 3%, about a 3% increase per year, and that's probably cost of living. And so we've kind of status quo the budget for this year and next.
Just briefly, Chief, mention the vehicle and equipment reserve. How many vehicles are budgeted in this line item?
Oh, boy, we have, we actually, for the line item budget, we have 2 vehicles budgeted. So, and what we like to do is, because we drive so much, we're out there constantly. If we crash a car and can't replace that car, our fleet is lean. So we've got a fleet management that we do that I've picked up over the years. And so replacement vehicles come back on years of service and or mileage, depending on which is more for safety concerns. But in the process, and we always have, each year we have a replacement vehicle typically. But if we get in a crash, we crash a car and one becomes disabled, we've got to be able to get another car. We're so lean, we just can't continue to operate. Otherwise, that throws everything off and the replacement cycles just go out of whack. And so it's just fiscally sound to do that. So.
And I think to get back to Counselor Garlington's point is we pay cash. We budget to pay cash. We don't lease our vehicles or do payment option plans for that. And when we buy a new one, we take one offline and we
Yep.
surplus it and sell it. So we're not building a fleet over in the parking lot there.
Right. So, and I'll take any questions. What's that? We don't crash cars that often.
I know.
Sure, comparably to what, but you know, there's times like in the snow, we slid down and kind of dinged up a car. We don't get in a lot of, maybe a backing. We had an officer back into a rock in Meldrum, well, one of the big ones. So it's not that often, but most of those we can get repaired. So, but that's just in case, like we had a what we call a lemon. And we just could not figure out, it would take like seconds or 30 to 45 seconds to restart. And we don't have that time. We can't wait. We have to get in a car and be able to go. So we had to take that car offline, but then we had to order another car. We had to sell that car. So to replace it. So it's just interesting how it worked out. But without that money available to us, and that'll carry over if we don't replace it. So we just like to kind of our reserve.
How often do people crash into you guys? No, just kidding.
I have a question about the juvenile and traffic diversion program. Well, generally, I'd just love to hear a little bit about what that is. And then specifically, it looks like the budget is reduced by about 50% over the prior budget. So can you tell us a little bit about the program and then also what that budget reduction means?
Yeah, so I'll talk to you a little bit about the program. And are you talking about the rich juvenile diversion? Yeah, council will probably be seeing that pretty soon as a renewal of that. But it's a lot like designed in line with the SRO program. It means it's taking juveniles of Gladstone. It's the county, it's a Clackamas County program where Latino Network is involved and working with youth within our community. So we support that. We support that just because a kid makes a mistake doesn't mean they need to go in the system. And so they use other areas to get them in. And so sometimes what they'll do is if someone's caught, like stealing, let's just say, instead of putting them in the system, they'll run them through the program and it's still through the juvenile department, but it goes away after their completion of their time. So they may have to do some community service. And at one point I worked with friends of Gladstone Nature Park to have them volunteer in there and to have other adults mentor these kids and move forward. So you'll see a staff report coming to the council regarding a renewal of that money being spent, and that's $2,500 a year. And we just got that IGA this week. And in fact, I think I talked to Jackie about that.
Yeah, the cost allocation has gone down. So that's all that the county is requesting from us. So we didn't lower the amount from 5,000 to a year. The county said, here's your allocation cost for 2,500.
Yes.
Yes, we do participate.
We're not stepping back from that.
No, it's a very good program and it's no different than, why our SROs are in there. We don't want kids to get in the system. We want to help kids. We want to, push them into different areas. So.
I think Counselor Huckabee has her hand raised. And Haley, are you able to get her so we can hear the audio?
She should be able to turn herself on.
Okay.
Yep, just unmuted myself. Chief, can you give a little more information on line item 500498, which is share cost CCOM dispatch? I see previously there was no cost, and then there's some fluctuation.
Yeah, I don't know why there's no cost, but CCOM and dispatch C800 is our radio and comms
Yes.
work that we do. So, and it's a portion, so Gladstone's portion of CCOM, and it's spread out countywide through all the agencies within Clackamas County to include fire. And so that's essentially our cost associated with that. And, so it's essentially to keep us going. Go ahead.
The reason there was none shown in the first two bienniums there was all financed prior to this under police levy. And so now we are, because as we had discussed at the very beginning, as far as the monies available within the levy fund percentage-wise have not increased at the same rate, we had to shift part of those costs over into the general fund.
So we were paying for the program out of a different fund, and
Police
now
levy fund.
a portion of that, or is it all of it, or just a portion of it
Portion of it.
is coming from this
Yes,
fund?
you'll also
Okay,
see it over in the police levy.
all right. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, so this is stating that we're gonna put away $182,000 for vehicles into the reserve account that you need it.
And what's the?
That
balance
is
on
one of,
today?
that is the concept of what the reserve account is, but John does have vehicles that he specifically does need to replace
So
within this
these-
next year,
Yeah. these
those
are
2
both-
years.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of our reserves are almost, as you would classify as a pay-as-you-go,
Gotcha.
and some of our reserves are looking more towards the future.
How many cars do we have?
We have 8 patrol vehicles. Well, you put me on the spot, a K-9 truck, that's new. And I'm sure most of you have seen the K-9 truck out there and our new design that we're going with. We have 2 detective vehicles. We have a chief's car and another command vehicle.
And what's the average life of a patrol car, like an actual one that drives around?
We typically try and go 5 to 6 years here in Gladstone, but it's years of service and or miles. So depending on how many miles get put on it, which is why if one goes down, that means other cars' miles go up and they have to get replaced sooner. So there's a kind of a method or madness on that.
I got a question. Just right, so we just did that on Lake Oswego to help you guys get your warrants and stuff. And there was a price for that. We paid it, right? Is it fall under one of these right here or does it not? Or-
Actually, it does. It falls under contractual and professional service
Oh, okay, so that's
under
what it
LOCOM. So that would go. So that's the warrant confirmation. We don't have 24/7, 7 days a week records. I don't think we need it. If we did, it would cost a heck of a lot more than what we're
Right.
paying.
No, we're getting
now.
a good deal. You got a
So,
good deal on that,
yes.
especially compared to other cities. The other question I had was, so, we've got that new K-9 truck and we've got the K-9.
Mhm.
And now you work with, like, if you need to go assist Oregon City or Milwaukee
Mm-hmm.
or something, you do that. Because but we don't charge when they need, like the night I rode along, they needed our K-9 way out in Malala. So
Yeah, no,
that's
we won't charge. That's mutual aid. And because they're
mutual aid,
Clackamas
okay,
County,
all
so
right.
everything's mutual aid.
in Clackamas County.
In Clackamas County, typically, I don't like our K-9 going outside the county. We have.
Okay.
Because there's exigency. We've sent our K-9 out there, who is very good and very praised throughout the county, by the way. But we like to keep it in-house, but we also require assistance from Oregon City that came in this weekend,
Okay,
or the
good.
sheriff's office that has come in that help us. We go help them also.
Perfect, good, that's all. That's it, bro.
You have an FTE count of 16.5. How is that working out? Are you able to keep that, or are you seeing a bigger turnover these days? How's that working out?
We're currently hiring right now. So we just had interviews today, and actually, I haven't even had a chance to talk to Administrator Betts, but successful moving forward to the next phase. And it's a long phase. It's difficult. It's difficult, one, to hire police officers today. It's difficult to find qualified ones. And then you got to find the ones that fit your community. and you don't want to be wrong. That's the problem. You don't want to be wrong. You want to be right the first time. And that's the tough part.
We have 2 vacant positions currently.
Could you comment briefly about what is the GEMS program? Is that like the net? No, or this?
No, GEMS is Gladstone Emergency Management Support.
Uh-huh.
And so we run emergency management through the city here. Support is how volunteers help us during the crisis. Right now, we've really focused on the senior center right now, opening up the community area, community resource center, and that's where GEMS does a lot of our support. So when people want to come and they can provide information, they can assist in different ways. We may hold briefings there depending on the crisis itself. So that's what GEMS is about. So
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So moving on to the Clackamas Fire and Emergency Services. They only have 1 picture. John has 10. And he has, it is a fabulous photo of that fire engine that we paid for by cash, one of them. So, but to get back to Joshua's original question about why did this happen? If you read the second bullet point, I think that really says it all. Is Clackamas Fire is able to provide comprehensive emergency services. It includes a staffed fire engine with 3 firefighters, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year round at the Gladstone Fire Station. It also includes chief officer coverage and a paramedic on duty every day in Gladstone. They also have a fire marshal that will assist us, and they have a public information officer that helps with community events. And so we have mentioned some of the noteworthy items here that I also mentioned in the budget message. But if you turn the page, you will see that everything that we had in the general fund related to fire services is going to Clackamas Fire District. And that is how you've got it allocated in here for the budget for those years.
We have a guaranteed contract amount that is only affected by the increase in assessed value percentage from year to year.
Where the service level will change is once we start talking about the fire services levy. If that does not pass, then Clackamas Fire will come back and go, okay, here's the reduction in services that will occur with that. So this is strictly a contract for services now, which is different than a merger. Remind everybody that we have not merged with Clackamas Fire. We are simply contracting with them to provide a service in Gladstone.
And keep in mind too, that they are also engaged in trying to get support for a levy, which will help them to either maintain or is it increase?
It will increase their staffing levels.
Okay,
But nobody in Gladstone had to vote on that.
right.
Because that is only for those that actually live in the fire district. And we'll know more tomorrow night how that levy fared. And I'll just show you real quick behind you. If you look at that map where the green is, that's Clackamas Fire District Service Area, and the pink is Gladstone. We are surrounded by Clackamas Fire, and it just made sense for efficiencies of services for us to contract with them.
Well, they keep a paramedic on
Yes.
every shift.
Is Sandy in that green?
Yeah, no, they're not. This is before Sandy.
Because Clackamas Fire is now working with Sandy's Fire District. And I can say that for all of the things that happen in Gladstone, we're a very small community. We're very encapsulated at times, but the fire services really gives us a handshake out to a lot of communities, and it feels really good when you're in different meetings and they start talking about the fire services and they look at Gladstone as a real role model for reaching out and allowing in a better service for our community and knowing that we couldn't do it. You know, we can write the check, bottom line, but we couldn't facilitate what we needed to do to make sure that every person was safe all the time. So this is, it's a really good feeling. At the time, it was very difficult, but it is a good feeling. And I'm glad to see that we write that check every year and get those services. So yes, and we need that fire levy to pass.
And just to piggyback off of Councilmember Garlington, has there been any issues with Gladstone residents complaining or feeling like the service has changed in a negative or positive way that anyone knows?
I live across from Adam, and they're there on the roof. And I go and I go over and walk and I talk to people out there that have mirrors. I couldn't be happier with having that paramedic that saved the ambulance trips. And you know what they're doing. You need a paramedic. They're happy. People are more positive outlook for us having an idea with fire, yes. Haven't heard any negative. And they kept our name on the fire engine, sorry. What you like?
Okay, moving on. Oh,
Councilor Reichel.
Just a request from all of you when you're speaking, would you remember to turn on your microphones? Because it's hard to hear you if you don't have it on. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
shall we start from the beginning?
No, it's okay. We're good. Thank you.
All right, next, Parks and Recreation.
All right.
I think we're gonna have Darren come back for this, the birthday boy.
Sorry.
Thanks for that, Jackie. Okay, parks. Some of the things that noteworthy items from last year, we completed the Meldrum Bar site plan. That was in our master plan that was done in 2017, I believe it was. Also, redid the pickleball and tennis courts at Max Patterson Park. Coming up in this current budget, we have the Meldrum Bar Park playground that will be installed. That's with the ARPA money and with the Good Neighbor funds. And then we have some improvements that the Parks Board has voted on doing at Robin Hood Park, adding a swing set there, putting in a picnic table, some benches, things like that. And then the Nature Park Loop Trail, that is the grant that we were talking about earlier. Some of the noticeable things, line by line, the contractual and professional services line, that line has gone up significantly. That's where all of our portable toilets come out of. That's the biggest line item or the biggest increase in this budget. We were actually over in the last biennium budget, and that was the main increase because of that. Other than that, everything else is pretty much stagnant, stays, with a small increase or 3% throughout. But what I wanted to touch on is the capital outlay. If you could turn to page 87. And Kathy will go through this some when we get to that. But if you look at parks on page 87, it shows the under capital improvements, shows the Meldrum Bar playground with the Good Neighbor grant. And then it also shows down below under American Rescue Plan grant, it shows the rest of that playground there. And then when you go to look at the Nature Park Trail, it shows the grant for the $100,000. And then it also shows the match for that grant of the $50,000. The Robin Hood Playground is also in there. That'll be coming out of capital as well for the 20,000 there. When we get to the other funds, the enterprise funds, we'll be going through this on this page quite a bit because that's where all of our projects are listed in this capital outlay. I think that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions?
I remember voting on a Meldrum bar. I believe it's the sites. There was like a dog park versus something one.
Yeah, that was the site plan that was done. Well, I'm assuming that was the site plan that was done. If it was recently as of
Yeah.
last year, yeah, that was the site plan there.
And what's the timeline for that? I must have missed it in your.
As far as all the improvements on,
Yeah.
so those are going to be basically, or they're going to need to be grant dependent. I believe the total amount on that was somewhere around $5 million for all the improvements for that. And the idea is we'll take them as we can get grants to be able to implement those throughout the park.
Okay.
Its staff parks are funded by general fund dollars. It competes with police and fire, the senior center. And unless there might be community support for a levy to do specific projects, it really is going to be a project on project basis. And so for this budget, what Darren was referring to is the improvements with the playground equipment that we have funds for and the Gladstone Nature Park. It is, again, a very lean budget, but is one that everyone loves our parks in the community, rightfully so. They're beautiful parks, and we have 17 of them that he has to maintain with, you can see his FTE down there, 2.95 FTE to do all of those parks.
So how come we're reducing the budget in the Parks Department? $300,000.
Largely the reason,
Oh.
excuse me,
Go ahead.
largely the reason that shows a reduction is because of the monies that, pardon me, that we had in capital improvements that were never realized by the parking fee. Remember, we were talking earlier about the 500,000 that we had in income shown for the parking fee that we were going to be able to use for park improvements. 500,000 didn't come in, so we didn't have 500,000 to spend. Those were budgetary numbers.
But we have a $10 million increase in our overall budget, and we're gonna take that away from the parks. We couldn't just come up with that $300,000. I mean, if I look at the overall picture, you guys know I'm gonna fight for the parks at every darn chance I can get. They just get shortchanged all the time. And I know that we do what we can, but that there's no contingency fund here for a grant that comes in. There's no contingency fund for the bathrooms that continuously get torn apart.
If we could go back to that capital outlay information sheet on page 87, you'll notice I know it's very small font, I apologize. There are the bottom two lines, we have undesignated, we have the kiosk funding balance, that being the parking fee. We anticipate over the biennium, we should bring in about $224,623 from the Meldrum Bar parking fee that has not been allocated anywhere, but it is staying within the parks for use. And then we also have $155,000 coming in and usable from the Good Neighbor grant from Wes. So right there, Mindy, is 380,000 roughly that is usable within the parks.
I know, but $380,000 doesn't hardly pay for a bathroom. Am I right, Darren, Mr. Canaparoli?
No, that'd pretty much wipe it out if you could even get there.
If you could even get there.
Yeah, but we were clear in our last budget message that if the revenues for the parking fee did not come in, we would have to reduce our budget. And that's what Kathy is saying, is that 500,000 was an inflated number. We didn't spend the funds for that because they didn't come in.
But what I'm saying is, why are we taking it from parks? Parks is an asset to our community. Everything else costs us money. That's our property. That's our thing. That's what our tourism people said. The reason people come to Gladstone is because of our parks. The pickleball people come and spend money. The kayakers, the people who launch their boats down there. That's park driven. And And we have to put money into our assets in order to grow our community, in order for people to want to come to Gladstone. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate every business that sticks their necks out and mortgages their home to bring a business into Gladstone. I appreciate them more than anyone knows, and we try from our house to support them as much as we can. But we have to support our parks in order for our parks to support the rest of our community.
But basically, we have the revenue that's available. If you wanted to add more to the parks, you would have to take it from another department.
And if that's the
And within the
direction that
general
the
fund.
budget committee gives
Mhm.
staff, then we would have to go back and
Yes.
reduce other general fund services by the $300,000.
I just don't understand why we're taking $300,000 away from parks.
The money
We
wasn't
don't have-
there.
I know, but we can cut, we seem to be able to cover it everywhere else. Why can't we cover it for parks?
Well, as I say, the revenues have been distributed out. The expenditures have been distributed out. If you wanted to change something at this point in time, it can be done, but it would come from some other, some other department within general fund.
So what would you like to see? Are you trying to ask for personnel or capital expenditures? Because it seems
Well,
like
we'd
there's-
like to have covered picnic areas down at Meldrum Bar. We'd like to have, we spent $50,000 on a master plan that we are going to get a new playground. Administrator Betts and Mr. Canaparoli pulled some funds from the ARPA fund check that we received. And we are going to get a new playground down there. But there's huge things that could happen in our parks. We have a lot of parks. A lot of green space, a lot of things that are necessary to upkeep those parks in order to keep them safe for all the children. And while we do a really good job at maintenance, our city does not do a good job at capital improvements when it comes to our parks.
So I hear that you're asking, but you have to specifically name. If it's gonna be covering the picnic tables, you're gonna have to bring a cost to us, well, to the table.
No, that's not how it happens. You have to allocate the money into the Parks Department, and then the
And then
Parks
spend it.
Board decides how you spend it. But the Parks Board doesn't hardly have, I mean, they're getting to the point now, they're gonna have to have a can drive to have money to do things. And that's not gonna cover big ticket items. I'm not gonna go home without saying it, because I have for about 10 years now, that I wish that Gladstone spent the money on the parks like some of these other communities do. And while I understand that they have, I don't know, Administrator Betts could tell us how much money, like Westland, I think they're $3 a household or something per month on their utility bill. They get that into their parks, and we don't get any of that. And unfortunately, we can't go after that, and I won't go into why. But I just think that our parks deserve more.
Kathy, can I ask, you were making a comparison, I assume, Councilor Gladstone, on page 56, the $2,022,000 bottom line item in the final budget,
Right.
and comparing that to the 1.8 million in the right-hand column.
Mhm.
And you're seeing that as about a $200,000 decrease.
Yes.
But the final budget is not the same as what is going to actually be spent in that department or the revenue that would be available in that department in this current year. We haven't completed that year yet. I think a better comparison is to compare 1.8 million with the 2019 to 21 actuals of 1,248, because I would imagine that if we got to the end of the year and got to actuals, we would be looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of what, 1.7 million for that?
Yes, and again, that 2.22 that is shown for the final budget includes that full 500,000 of parking fee revenue coming in, because we anticipated if it came in, we would have the appropriation to spend it. It did not come in. So you can immediately reduce that by the amount of revenue that we were anticipating for the parking fee for this fiscal year, which is roughly, give me a second to get to my place here, We anticipate, we budgeted 500,000 and I believe I anticipated we get about 150,000, maximum.
Okay,
So right there is a 350,000 reduction that we could have gone in and through budget adjustment formally reduced the budget of the Parks Department. We didn't do that. We just recognized we could not spend the money.
okay. So in terms of revenue sources, we originally thought, now we're 2 years ago, we originally thought that the increase in revenue in order to add substantial funding to parks, capital, and other parks would have come from making everyone in the community pay for parking at Meldrum Bar.
Exactly.
And the council decided that it was better to only have people who lived outside the community pay for that. And so rather than seeing a $500,000 increase in that budget, we saw a $150,000 increase. And that's $350,000 that never materialized. So it's not a cut. It's a cut from we thought we could have made had we done something. Now, if we had, and you refer to other options in terms of a fee added to people's utility bills, which is what they do in the city of West Lynn. A levy for parks, we could try to impose.
Those are all things that a budget committee could recommend that we explore in the next couple of years to do that. Yes.
I just want more for our parks, that's all.
Oh, and I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, I think there's a lot of people here who would agree, generally speaking, that like we need to invest it in our parks.
I'm on.
Oh, thank you. I am too. I'm just far away. So I think just to get a better vibe for like what your vibe, is that a budget committee
Yeah,
word that we
that's
should be
okay.
using? To get a better feel for what you're specifically looking for, are you proposing revenue enhancements, or are you proposing moving money specifically from another account into parks?
I would probably like to see some money moved around so that the parks could have more money for capital improvements. So that we can rent out covers, so we can put better picnic benches in, so that we could put in that ball field and spend them or we would have revenue coming in if we put in some of those ball fields down at Meldrum Bar. Then we would have a place that we could say, hey, we can rent you out our big ball system for the weekend and bring you and everybody you know down here. You're going to pay for parking. You're going to pay to use our ball fields for the weekend for your tournament, or our soccer fields for the weekend. There's a lot of things that we can do that we would have to put money out right now. I understand that, and I know this isn't going to happen, but I'm not going to let a budget meeting go by without advocating for our parks, because quite honestly, that's what people expect of me. So
You've done it.
I have done my due diligence.
And not to take us in a totally different direction either, but have we explored charging residents reservation fees for our existing facilities?
It's kind of hard to do, like we're right up at Max Patterson. I don't know how that would work out. I think that's kind of a parks board with Mr. Canaparoli kind of thing. And
I don't know that I'm proposing that, but I know that many of our neighboring communities do that.
Sure. And it becomes an administrative nightmare, because then who is going to administer those? And is it really worth the money that's coming in for that? I mean, I agree. I think we need to explore revenue enhancements. If you cut, we're cutting people. I mean, that is how lean we are here. If you're telling us, and you don't have to make that decision, you would say, okay, city administrator, go find $300,000, put it in parks. We would have to go back to the department heads and see that. But at that point, you really are cutting a couple positions in a different department.
I guess Mindy, like I am right there with you. Like, we need to prioritize parks. And I think maybe we should carve out some time to talk about potential revenue enhancements, if that's something we want to pursue.
Thank you.
But I guess like, I want to be more specific, right? Like, like let's be specific about what we're asking for, and talk through it. And that's a larger conversation than we're going to be able to solve.
Okay. I just had to have my picture. That's all.
Well, my question would be then, so we, 500,000 you planned on, you guessed we'd get that. Now you're saying it's 150,000.
Mhm.
Is that in after taking in consideration the kiosk got broke again, it cost us this much to fix, and we take that out of what we still owed for the I mean, what's the bottom line on the kiosk? Are we making money? Is it costing us?
Yes, we are starting
We are
to make
starting-
money. out of
Starting
that,
to make
yes,
money,
and
okay.
there is a report that is put into the newspaper every single month.
Right, yeah. no,
Our
I see,
parking
yeah.
fee revenues, and you're more
Mhm.
than, you know.
Yeah, no, I
the
know. I
Information is
pushed
there
for
and it
that.
shows exactly what kind
Hmm.
of money we are making.
Yes,
It's not
it's the Greg
huge.
Alexander newsletter
Yes.
article. on
Yep.
parking.
Well, I wanted everyone in the community to know
Yes.
what it was bringing in and when it got
Yes.
broke, how much it cost to fix.
Yes.
So they knew what we were
Yes.
actually getting out of that
And
kiosk.
yes,
Yeah.
and that is shown also to the expenditures offset against.
And so that's what I'm asking. So this
Yes.
150,000 is, it's not
No, that
guessing,
was
it's
the
not estimating.
revenue.
That was
the
it. That's
revenue,
my question.
yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
All right, continue.
Darren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure that Tiffany is thrilled to come up here now and talk about the senior center. And for those of you that have not met Tiffany, she is phenomenal. We brought her in as our community services manager, and there are so many positive things going on at the Gladstone Senior Center. So we are on page 59.
Page 59. Hello. It's nice to see your faces and meet some new people. About green space, utilizing the green space also is super important. And I just want to say that the community center is planning, which you will hear about soon, a music on the greens. And we're going to utilize the green space that's next to the senior center to get people out there. I didn't realize we had 17 green spaces, but we just think that, you know, other cities do the music, music in the park. And we want to start the first, and we have some bands lined up to make a series this summer. So I hope that helps in some way, because I need every single staff person that I have. And we run Slim also. I feel like the budget for the senior center is very simple. And the major things, I will do the noteworthy and the budget highlights, but the major thing you'll see here is that one of my positions, which is called nutrition caterer, but truly that position is also responsible for all of the volunteers that come into the center, and we completely rely on the volunteers. That has increased our program level. And we work together in partnership, all of us at the center. But the position, having the time instead of half time in the kitchen and just working with our food box program and delivery, being able to, encourage community members to sign up as volunteers has allowed us to make our program at the center super valuable and looked forward to events. And so to me, it's just been invaluable to have that full-time position. So she's temporarily full-time currently in this biennium, but she's going to go to full-time. So that means there'll be 3.6. And Michelle, who is our tram driver, currently is at 25. And so we're just moving her up 5 more hours, so 0.75. But not until the following year. So not in this first fiscal year, but we're needing that. Those, there's 3.5 of us and we make things happen at the center. So I'm saying that it's slim because we could use more. But the only way we're able to function and do all of the wonderful activities that I know people love, even our own. This is not community school, not the Gladstone Community School. These are other activities and offerings that we've created for people to enjoy coming to the senior center over other centers around us, in fact. So I'm just making a plug that's really the big thing is the salary. You're seeing a full-time person and then adding 5 more hours. And then, of course, within this time frame that we have here in 23, I'm going to spend the money that came in for grants. We've already spent actually to buy the new van, and then do some upgrades in our kitchen dining room area. But those are really the significant things. I mean, everything else is pretty much status quo.
It is
unless I'm-
a very lean budget. The
It is.
75,000 that you're referring to is on page 60, and that is a grant that
Yeah,
you
page
received.
60.
Yes.
Yes, that's under vehicles and equipment. And just noteworthy items, I mentioned our position for the nutrition caterer, which is actually also the volunteer coordinator for the center. But we have a food box program. I don't know if some of you don't know that, but we have about 55 homebound seniors. So the only way they would qualify, they can't just be any person that needs groceries. They have to be 60 plus. They have to meet certain criteria of not getting enough nutrition. But we set this criteria based on what's required for receiving the hot meals. Those are reimbursed by the county, by Clackamas County. But the grocery box is not something we have to do. We're not reimbursed for it. I mean, we want to make that program stronger if possible. So I rely heavily on the volunteers that literally put it together on a long table every Thursday and make sure that it gets to the family or the person at home. So that's a whole program. And the legacy garden also is something that didn't exist at the center, and we were able to put that together along with Gladstone Senior Foundation. And so we need to take care of that garden. So part of that is, gathering people and making sure that we can all take part in keeping that beautiful and accessible to people. It's also an attraction to the center so that people see that we care about our building. And we also have another space to use and maybe even rent. So we're hoping to increase our rental rates coming up here soon, looking at improving one of our extra rooms that we have. We've used this extra room in the center to allow more people to attend the new Rotary sponsored community bingo. So we want to make that room rentable. And to do that, we need to make the center look, beautiful. So we're having it painted, interior painting done. That doesn't affect this budget, but I'm just telling you that these are things that will allow us to rent the space better and offer it to our community. And it makes people want to be there, and it makes a sense of pride about their space and that we care about our senior center facility. So, yeah, I'll just add that we're going to purchase, actually, we've already paid for. It's called myseniorcenter.com. You can go there. It's software. Other seniors have this, and it helps you track and report attendance and activities and things like that. That's the kind of data you need for grants. And so this will help our accuracy when we turn in records that we do have to provide to the county for their contract. So we just purchased that and it hasn't been installed quite yet. Talked about the van. I have dreams of monetizing, like a really cool adventure component so that people who don't attend the center but want to get out and do some field trip or something that's different as they age can do that through a service with our really cool van that we have that we're going to have wrapped and looking really nice, not just the black van that it is. So all of these things happen with this 3.6, soon to be 3.75. And I think we do really well. Plus, can't forget all of the volunteers. There's less than 100, but that's a lot of volunteers for one place. So
Thank you, Tiffany.
yeah, I could keep going.
Tiffany, can I ask you something?
Yes.
And I don't want to spoil the announcements that you have to make to our work session next week by going into too much detail
okay.
on the name change. But how do you draw a distinction between being community services director and senior center director? Say a little more about that community services component of how you see your job.
I mean, it's not complicated. I would just say that the community service piece just means that I want to include the entire community. So we're not excluding you based on age. So we want to diversify, and that's been the voice of most of the people that come there. And so we just want to move forward with that. So to me, that's the major difference. It's just about age, and it's about including people that may or may not look like us, or have different income levels, different education status, but that you're welcome here in Gladstone, and we want to be the welcome stop. And so we want to be able to learn how to offer programs for different types of people. We want to
Yep.
become that.
And we've already heard from Chief Schmerber that that the facility there would be one in case of an emergency, the
It is
GEMS
also a
program.
resource center, and it just, in that capacity, we would maintain being open for people that need it. So far, since I've been here, I haven't seen that a lot of people need it, just like you would think, I need to come and cool off, or I need to, but that doesn't mean during times of extreme emergencies, it wouldn't be the location where people might gather or need to charge something or whatever, or a meeting place, but we're available. So
Good, thank you.
that's the goal. Yeah.
Other questions from committee members?
I just want to say that I know that everybody in this community appreciates what you and your staff do on a daily basis. And, it's heartwarming. So thank you.
Councillor Huckabee?
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a question, Tiffany, regarding the nutrition caterer
Yeah.
position. Kind of a lengthy question. Have we looked at maybe changing the job title? And is there an updated job description? And I'm asking this because people familiar with HR practices know title and job descriptions can directly affect whether you're FTE status and your salary.
Dog agrees.
Yeah. Yes, we have. And that is something that it's unofficial, meaning we haven't actually changed the job title, but I have been working on that title, a new title, since we offered the temporary full-time position. So it sounds like maybe we might want to look at that before the beginning of this next biennium to make it official, like changing the title. But the job description I've been working on with our HR, and we have a new description. It just hasn't been implemented because it was a temporary position. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
All right. Thank you, Tiffany.
Okay.
The one thing I also wanted to add is that with a lot of these changes that are being implemented there at the senior center, we're also working on the revenues. And you'll see if you look through the budget, some of the revenues that are directly correlating back to their activities. I just did a ballpark in my head, but about a $50,000 increase over the biennium. For anticipated revenues coming in from tram trips, from meal charges, the social services contract that we have with Clackamas County, et cetera. So
okay,
we are keeping that in mind.
Okay, moving on to library. I hope all of you are very excited that the Board of Commissioners is going to give the go-ahead Wednesday to move forward, and they could start construction in mid-June to do that. You see the noteworthy items there. We did demolish the old city hall. We're ready for that new library. But again, it's like with the Clackamas Fire District, we contract for services with Clackamas County. And so the money that we did have for materials and services and personnel services all goes directly to Clackamas County to provide the operations of the library. Is there anything else you wanted to share on that?
Not at all.
I have a question, and the budgetary highlights for the library says that the 2023-2025 budget consists of only the annual contribution of 200,000. I don't recall a line like that before the table. Is that a new
contractual and professional services.
Mhm.
That is the 200,000, and again, it's adjusted every year for the increase in assessed value within the city.
Hmm.
So
That is in the settlement agreement with Clackamas County that we will provide that. They keep all the district revenue associated with Gladstone. The county gets that. We used to get it. They keep that, plus we contribute this amount, the 219
yes.
each year. Clackamas County, they are all Clackamas County employees.
Now, this gets us through the general fund portion of the budget. We will begin to look at individual, more dedicated funds than public works related things. Over what we've done so far, are there any general questions about the whole thing? We've kind of looked at each section separately.
No general questions, but an observation that it's 8 PM. It may be wise to the bio break.
Okay, all right. I'd be willing to do that. Let's take a 10-minute break. And we'll come back and resume. I noticed, I went back to look at the last time the budget committee met 2 years ago. And we met and finished everything in one night, and our meeting lasted 2 hours and 39 minutes. And we have been here exactly 2 hours and 39 minutes right now. So, and for some of us maybe didn't get dinner yet. So I'm wondering if we want to consider, the pace at which we go through the rest of this, or whether we want to look at deciding that we will not complete the task tonight and go ahead and schedule that second meeting on the 30th, 31st, 30th, I guess it was. So let me get a sense of where the committee is on that. I would like to go home. Okay. All right, we got through the meat of the main part of the budget, the general fund portion. The others will get down to some of the more, some of the enterprise funds, the things that are segregated, that create their own income and create their own expenditures. We will need to bring some staff back, particularly Public Works, for that. But am I getting a sense that going to a second meeting would make people happy? I don't want you to burn out and not feel like you've given it all. And so I think that'll do it. So let me get some input from staff. Does that sound?
We will do whatever it is the pleasure of the budget committee. I just wanted to confirm it's not Memorial Day, it's the day after, which
Okay,
is Tuesday, the 30th.
okay. And it is the 5th Tuesday of the month. So people that have regular things on the 2nd or the 4th Tuesday, it's not going to conflict with that.
And we would do 5:30, reconvene. We all have that reserved from management's perspective. So it's the pleasure of the budget committee.
Okay, very good. Well,
Yes.
so I will entertain a motion to, for this committee to be in recess until Tuesday night, May 30th at 5:30 PM. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Counselor Alexander, seconded by Counselor Roberts. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we are in recess until that meeting. Thank you.